Yeah, we are live. It's 8:35 on what is Friday in the morning? They all tend to blend together. As you can see from the thumbnail, I did yesterday. It was nice outside, so it was 60, 65 degrees. Got to take Milo for a run or for a hike up in the hills, which is very cool. He loves getting out and getting up there and running around, getting to be a dog, chasing squirrels and stuff. And also, I set the 396 block out in the sun, basically just rolled it out in the engine stand, set it out in the sun, let it, let it bake and warm up. But then I was able to put paint on the block, got the block all painted. The heads were already done because I'd done those previously on a nice warm day. Got the pan painted, got the front cover painted. So now I need to go. I think I'm going to do Gliptol next in the valley cover. So we'll do some masking on that and, get that all done up, so all the oil drains out really nice. For some reason, people love to see that. I would like to see what it really does if it helps with oil drain back and stuff. But I know that it's one of those things that everybody's done since back in the day, and that's the mark of a good race motor or whatever. The one thing I did notice, and maybe we'll do this for tonight or for tomorrow. I'm going to measure the depth of the notch in the factory notch in the 396 block because they use the big valve rectangular port heads, the same ones that they use on the 427 and the 454. On the smaller bore 396, they actually had to notch the edge of the cylinder so that the big valve had clearance. This begs the question: how well does that flow when the cylinder size is smaller than the chamber size, and then when the valve overhangs that, are we getting the flow that we need? Is that limiting the power production? In reality, given the power rating of the 396 at 375 horsepower, that head will support like 600. So, it's even if it's only using a portion of it, I think it's probably good, but it'll be interesting to see. And it's something that the reason I bring that up is that's something that I want to try on the LS. I want to put rec port heads on the small bore 4.8 and 5.3 or 5.3, probably a 5.3, but I have a 4.8 already that I don't care about because I'm just happy that it even ran. So it'll be interesting to notch that. I think comparing a 4.8 and a 5.3 with rec port heads on it, it'd be a better choice to use a 5.3. And I want to do the same thing that they did on the 396, and other OEM stuff has done that as well, where they notch the edge of the bore. And so I want to notch the edge of the bore on the LS so that we can use the bigger valve head in it, even though we know that the chamber is bigger than the opening of the cylinder is. The chamber size is going to overhang that. The valve obviously is overhanging the edge. We're going to have the same situation that we have in the 396, and yet they did it from the factory. And so, again, in the same vein and almost in the same power range, the heads will support the LS factory rec port heads will support way over 600 horsepower. In fact, more than 650 horsepower. We've made way more than that. And on a 4.8 or a 5.3, that's more than enough cylinder head, even if we're only using a percentage of that. Even if we're only using 80 or 90% of it. So I'm happy that I got that done, and so that's what your motivation is. I've got stuff done. You guys need to go get stuff done. I'm going to be heading down to Wastegate for too long here and getting more dyno testing done, which I'm very excited about. Definitely going to do some spark plug stuff. Definitely going to do some turbo stuff as always, and definitely going to do some Dodge turbo stuff specifically. So that's what's going on. But I also wanted to talk about the test that I did, the video that I put up yesterday, which was the comparison between the Hooker cast turbo manifolds and the tubular headers that we've run. Lots of people have run them up and forward or down forward or whatever, which way you want to run them. But they're just basically kind of a shorty or mid-length header, if you will. And then you just feed all the exhaust from those into a wide pipe or into twins. We've used them for twins on the Big Bang motors as well. And obviously they work. But here's the question. We did, if you haven't seen the video, you need to go check out the video. So here's the test. We did a comparison between those and the turbo manifolds, ran it with the same turbo, same exhaust, all of that stuff, same intercooler, same air fuel, same timing, same boost level. And then there was a difference in power. That in and of itself is not terribly surprising to me. Just looking at them, I would expect that. listening to them on the dyno, I would expect that. They do sound dramatically different. But here's the question, and these are the questions posed by a number of comments that I got from on the live feed, from the comments from the video that I posted, and this is interesting stuff. And we've talked about this in these live feeds before, and that's that when we do a test and we get answers, we also get a lot more questions. So here are the concerns when we're testing this. So we're measuring back pressure. Where we measure back pressure was basically right before the turbo. So in the merge, right before the turbo. On the Holley setup, or on the hooker setup, we have an elbow coming off of the 3-inch V-band that exits out after the two merge together. So we measured back pressure there. So we drilled a hole in our steel tube. Actually, we had already had the hole drilled from using that on previous, because we used that same elbow on twin systems, on single systems, on another setup. So there was it's basically a pipe tap that we put a fitting in, and then we hook an aluminum line with a compression fitting or a flare fitting on it, like a brake line. And then it runs a spiral aluminum tube because it's hot exhaust. And then it runs up into a pressure sensor for the dyno. So we measure back pressure, and then that way we can see, okay, here at this boost level, hopefully it's fairly flat. And then we have this kind of back pressure curve. I can tell you, and so here's the concern. The concern is, where are you measuring back pressure? Because if we have a restriction in the exhaust, the restriction should be really, you would think, it stands to reason, and these are the comments that people were making, that the restriction should be between the cylinder head and wherever that restriction is. So the restriction from the exhaust, if the exhaust manifolds are indeed restrictive, or more restrictive than the headers are, we should see that between wherever the restriction is and the cylinder head. So in the manifold itself. And we're not measuring that in the manifold, we're measuring that before the turbo. And yet we're seeing a difference in back pressure there. So we know one thing is certain, that the turbo is not doing that. So the turbo itself is the same. So it hasn't changed. But the Y pipe definitely has. So on one of them, the merge is in the exhaust in the manifold itself, and then comes out as a single entry. It comes out as a 3-inch V-band. Now our other setup, that Y pipe connected together into about a 3-inch opening, and then we mounted our T4 flange on that. That was before I started merging them into a 3-inch V-band and then using an adapter. So this was before that. The other difference, and this is one of the things that we're going to talk about, is one setup only has a single wastegate and the other one has dual wastegates. So here's the concern. If you're measuring back pressure right by the turbo, does that accurately represent any sort of back pressure that we would have caused by the manifold? Because you would think that that would be between the manifold and the head. That's a fair question. Here's what I can tell you is, I wish that I would have measured it there so we could see if there's one thing, because we could see if there's a difference between there and right by the turbo. I know people logically would think that there would be, but here's what I can tell you is, I got this same question when we were running the headers. So they said, well, where are you measuring? Where are you measuring back pressure? The back pressure is going to be different in different spots on that system. So I'm like, okay, well, it's easy for me to test. So I have we have our fitting right before the turbo as they merge up and go together right before the turbo. I measured back pressure there. I measured back pressure down in what is essentially the collector of the header. And then I also measured it on a turn coming off, going into the Y pipe from the other side. And so measured in all of those different spots on the header setup, the back pressure is exactly the same. Because everybody told me no, and it's definitely going to be different. It's going to be more there on the bend, and it's going to be different there than it is right by the turbo. And there's more buildup at the turbo, and all of these, all of these theories. The back pressure was the same everywhere in that system. That doesn't mean that it's going to be the same everywhere in the system with the cast manifolds. But whether or not it is, I don't know. But the thing that we do know is there is a change in back pressure offered by that setup. And we also know that there's a change in power offered by that setup if we use boost as the measurement. If we stabilize the boost and where the boost is the same, there is a difference in power. And there is a difference in back pressure. So the next thing that people are pointing to, they're saying, okay, look, one of these had a single wastegate, which basically essentially had a slightly rising boost curve. So we got up to our 11 pounds out at the top of the RPM range. We didn't have enough control to just have it stabilize at, really the gate was set at 7 pounds and we ended up with 11. So we didn't have enough wastegate to control it, but we still got our 11 pounds out at the top. And then running our header system, we controlled it so that we also got 11 pounds at the top. So I could monitor that last 500 RPM range basically to get some sort of comparison. It's not perfect. It's not 11 pounds all the way across or 7 pounds all the way across, whichever one we could get. It's not exactly the same all the way across. I'm actually not concerned with that because we have the right boost pressure. The boost pressure is the same, the airfill is the same, the timing is the same, and then we see a difference in back pressure and we see a difference in power. So I would say that those two systems are different in their power production. But here is the concern with the wastegates. So on one of them, we have a wastegate that's basically not enough to control it. It's allowing out at the higher boost level, basically, enough so that we're getting that boost level. When we have two wastegates, we have basically more potential exhaust flow going out. So that's why we have better control. So it's also allowing us, when we adjust it, to achieve that same 11 PSI. But the concern is are we allowing more exhaust flow out with the dual wastegates to achieve that? So what would be the result? So if we're allowing more exhaust flow out, what we would be changing then is the impeller speed. So is the turbo spinning now? And if we had an impeller speed monitor, which I don't have on these inexpensive turbos, if we had an impeller speed, we'd be able to see that. I know that if we had an air hat on here, we would see a different amount of airflow because we're making more power. Those two would certainly go together, especially given the fact that we didn't have a change in timing. We actually did have a change in fuel flow because we made more power. I had to add fuel because I had to make sure that we had the same air fuel ratio. We can't have it just go leaner and then make more power. And then people would say, well, yeah, but it made more power because it was leaner. No, when we supply the same fuel flow and it adds airflow because it had changed and it added airflow, it will change the air fuel. So I kept the air fuel the same right at, I don't know, it was 11.8 or something, whatever it was there. And so we kept that the same, but because it made more power, we had to add more fuel. We didn't add more fuel to make more power. It added airflow, and then I added fuel to make sure that the air fuel was the same. The timing never changed. So we had that the same. So the thing is, are those wastegates flowing more exhaust, or are they only opening enough so that they're flowing the same amount as the other one eventually did to produce the same boost control? I don't have an answer to that. I don't know what that is. I mean, I guess we could monitor exhaust flow, or we could monitor, if we could monitor impeller speed, then we would be able to see that. But this is a perfect example of what happens when you test something and then you come to some sort of conclusion. We know that there's a change in back pressure and we know that there's a change in power, but people are looking beyond that, which is fantastic. I want them to do that and thinking, well, could it be something else? Yes, maybe it can. Maybe the wastegate change and attending impeller speed, because, and here would be the thing, if that's happening, if we're improving the exhaust flow or increasing the exhaust flow, changing the impeller speed, we would be putting the turbo in a different part of the map because impeller speed is going to change the map position. The boost is the same, the airflow is greater, and the impeller speed is different. So because the airflow is greater and the impeller speed is different, we're in a different part of the map. Are we in since we don't have maps for these, we don't know, but are we on a better part of the map? So have we not only increased impeller speed, but have we improved the relative efficiency of the impeller by doing that because we're now in a different map spot? There's lots of stuff there. There's lots of stuff to talk about, but it's all very interesting and it's all very cool. So it might be that because we did that, I still think that the Hooker stuff is not what I would choose to build a race setup, and I don't think they don't promote it as that. They promote it as a thing that you could put on to put a turbo on your LS in your Camaro or Chevelle or C10 or whatever it is, and it fits and it works, and you make boost and you make lots of power. And so because 95 or more percent of us that are doing turbo stuff are 1,000 horsepower and less guys, that's the kind of system that you probably would want to use, especially if it looks really nice, it packages well, it does the things that you would need, and it solves a lot of problems for guys. A guy can do it obviously cheaper by using stock truck manifolds, but even then, if he has accessories and stuff, he's gonna have to cut them and re-angle them, and a lot of guys just can't do that. A lot of guys don't want to do that, and when you do that, it doesn't look nearly as good. So there's definitely a market for that setup, even if it's down on power a little bit from what you could do with with these ugly burn your plug kind of headers. And now Hooker has even solved that with much better headers. So if you want to use that and you want to go that route, they also offer that stuff as well. So let's see what you guys got going on. We got to get a poll going. Poll for the morning. So for the wastegates, were the wastegates responsible for the power change on the exhaust test? We'll see what people think. What's your opinion? Let's see. We're going to scroll in. Welcome. Good morning, every TGIF. Richard, what heads are you using? The ones that we used on the test were stock 706 heads. Oh, and the heads that I'm using, maybe you're talking about the ones on the big block. The big block are 219s. Factory ovals versus AFRs. That wouldn't even be close. The AFR 265 head is a way better head than the factory oval stuff. But the RPMs on the 4.8. Yeah, because that's a short stroke. Lives the Rib, just bored to 427. No, we want to build a 396. But I'm also building a 454. I'm still looking, so please, you guys, put the feelers out and let me know, or if people are watching this video, let me know. I need a 396 camshaft. I need the stock 396, 375 horse solid lifter camshaft. So if you have one of those, please let me know. Might go out and work on the turbo mount today. Lisa and I are going out to celebrate our anniversary. Happy anniversary. The L78 was a baby L6. It kind of is. It's like the DZ302 to its LT1 big brother. Yeah, the engine is looking good. It's nice to get and I mean, I have a video that I did. It's a high-speed deal, and I'll show you from, painting it, and it looks cool. That high-speed stuff's always good. I'm going to delete the cat off my diesel truck and see if I pick up some free horsepower. L34 was a baby LS5. The 404 doesn't eat 403s. 404 probably was never. I won't. Does anybody know, Dean? Do you know what the highest horsepower rating was for that 400 Ford? Was it still in the 100s? Was there an EGT probe to see the thermal retention to comparison? Temperature versus expansion could play a role. So you want an EGT in the exhaust setup? I didn't do an EGT, but what I can tell you is that when we do turbo stuff, I have to do a couple of runs to stabilize the temperature and response rate on a turbo application on the engine dyno, and we do that until it repeats. But it's most concerning for low speed boost response. Usually the rest of the curve is the same. It's just that it doesn't come on as quickly. You might want to revisit the test. I don't need to revisit the test. We already know what the results are. But I don't have a way to measure impeller speed, and that's what I would need. Put some 4V heads on the 400. It definitely will wake that up. We did that on the 400 that I built. Won't cast manifolds impart more heat into the exhaust and thus expansion? Why would they do that? Do you know while the thing is running, after you've put heat into the turbo, do you know how fast that's going through? And do you know how much heat you're losing in a turbo exhaust manifold during the time of the run? We're the only engine dashes. Dean, they did get rid of the hyphen on the LT1 specifically and the LS6, and I think that they were doing that to try to differentiate the different versions of those. Viewer poll: should Larry abandon his small block Chevy stroker dreams and do a big block? Bigger motors make more power, and they make a lot more average power, which is the nice thing. If you take a look at a really good example is if you take a look at the DZ302 versus the L76 327 versus the LT1 350, and you're like, yeah, they all make 355-ish horsepower. Yeah, they do. But one of them has 95 or 100 more foot-pounds of torque down low. So which one of those is actually going to be funner to drive? Sell the 396. I'm not putting together the 396 because I think it's better or makes more power than a 5.3. I'm putting the 396 together so that we can illustrate what an L78 actually made, just like I did with the other motors. When it's done, it probably is going to get sold. .396 56 Corvette, definitely 4-speed. Will more back pressure cause more underhead heat to build up? No, not really. The difference that you're seeing about the difference that you would see from back pressure and heat would be next to nothing, because you're already talking about stuff that's going to be 1,000, 11, 1,200 degrees in the exhaust anyway. So the back pressure might change at 5 or 10. So you wouldn't ever notice that. You're getting lots of heat from the turbo stuff anyway. Let some guy build his tribute car, but you can go faster with an LS. You can't go faster with an LS than you can with a big block. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but that's not anywhere near accurate. Nobody in a pro mod motor is building a smaller LS than they would be building a bigger big block. It just doesn't make sense. So as an absolute thing, you can't say that. You can say that you can go to the wrecking yard and get a 5.3 and put a cam and springs and turbo on it and make lots of power. But you can also do that with a big block. One thing I never understood, the 396 big block runs best with square port 300 plus cc heads in stock form. So why does it? Scott, I'm not sure that that's true. I'm actually not sure that this 396 wouldn't be better and make as much or more power than it does with that rec port head if we put a 049 oval port head on it. I don't think anybody's ever done that. Well, somebody had to have done it at some time because it's not utilizing anywhere near what that head flows. GM put that rec port head on there because that's what they put on their performance heads. I mean, that's what they put on their performance motors. They even went to the trouble of notching the bore to put that on there. But I don't, it would be interesting to see what an 049 on there would do. The early 400s had small block bell housings and the later ones had big blocks. Yep. It's not even the 95 or 100 foot-pounds. It's the average horsepower. Yeah, the one of them makes a lot more, but that's the thing. If you have a 95 or whatever, 100 foot-pounds down low, and it makes the same power up top, that's a big average power change. Loved my L98 short block with an LT4 hot cam, 487 heads, tall street dominator engine. For 75 Ford didn't release peak power ratings on some engines. Wow. The big oval versus rec port stuff Rich has done has always been interesting. What are the possibilities the rec port were done for homologation? Are you talking about the big block stuff, or the? I guess we could also talk about. Well, I mean, a cathedral wouldn't really be an oval port. Old trick super stockers used to do is run rec port heads but use oval port intakes. Did that really work? Do big blocks make more power per pound of boost due to larger displacement? It's not just big block. That's a function of the NA power output. Whatever your NA power output is, if you're making more NA power, you will make more horsepower per pound of boost when you add boost to that. Because the amount of power that you make under boost is a function of the NA power that you're starting with. When you recommend switching to colder plugs on an LS, we do it when we run boost. It's probably a good idea when you run nitrous also. And Christopher, I figured guys did it. I just have never seen a back-to-back test of a 396 like this version, the dome piston, 375 horse version, and then somebody took off a set of 219 heads or a rec port head, a factory rec port head, and then put on a factory 049 head, something that had the same chamber size, hopefully. The thing is, you would have to change the intake too. And so you'd have to have a dual plane high rise equivalent intake manifold. Because I know when Brule was doing tests with Freiberger, they did some tests with oval port and rec port heads and intake manifolds. And the oval port version of the intake manifold did not flow as well as the rec port intake version did. They had to port the oval port version of the head to get it to flow. And when they did that, then it brought the power back up. 375 horse 396 has a notch bore. Yeah, it does. It does from the factory. And I don't know of other versions that would have done that. I don't think that they did that. I don't remember seeing that on any of the small bore small blocks. A 425 stroke crank and that 396 with a slight overbore makes for a nice combination. So you're doing a small 496 then? Zach, I have to disagree with heat not playing a significant role. So who said heat doesn't play a significant role? It wasn't me. The 350 Pontiacs, that's right. Yeah, no, I was thinking small block Chevys. I have a 350 Pontiac, and I remember the Pontiac guys telling me about that. Let's see. My small block Ford twisted wedge heads ate a valve guide on a 302. Joe, that would more than likely be caused by insufficient guide clearance to begin with. Probably not a lack of oil from the seal. Port matching always helps flow and power. I haven't seen that be the case, especially when we use the word always. I've seen 427 big block Chevys builds that made mid 500s with an oval port head and moderate roller cam. Yeah, even an oval port head flows enough to support a decent amount of power, especially ported versions. We've done tests with ported oval ports, factory oval ports that made a lot of power. People would also put rec port intakes on oval port heads. We've run rec port intakes, and the Mercury Marine does that from the factory. They run that combination. They put a rec port intake manifold on oval port heads. We've run rec port intakes on peanut port heads, and it still works. I put Dart 308 Iron Eagles on my 396. Plenty of US engines got notch bores. So they got notch bores from the factory? Jimmy, I don't know if we obviously can calculate velocity. I'm sure, look at Vizard's deal. He probably has that on his. Because if you flow more air through the same size opening, you're going to have increased velocity. You have to. There's a BTR stage 1 torque cam. I didn't know that they had different stages of torque cams. I just know that they have a torque cam, and the torque cam you can easily use with a stock converter. Solid LS6 cam was the same as a solid L78 cam. I don't think it's available through GM anymore. The approximate 402 cubic inch small block Chevy versus a 402 396. The big block is going to win that because a big block has way more head flow. If you're talking about stock stuff. What's the difference? Big deal between the bathtub head and open and closed chamber. Well, the open and closed chamber is more a chamber size, although it has to be used with a specific piston as well, because otherwise it will hit, I think. But a smaller chamber size is going to have more compression if you keep the piston the same. Daniel, thank you very much. We will use that tonight. Did you notice the difference in switching to colder plugs NA? It doesn't do anything. And we'll see when I do all my super Richie spark plug testing. We don't notice a change in power. We just do it to help suppress potential detonation. Elgin makes L6 and L78 cams. They did, but they don't have any in stock. Would you explain the higher mid-range boost pressure yesterday? Yeah, we had a different boost control. I went over that in the video. Planning any trips to the wrecking yard? Yeah, when I go down to Wastegate, I definitely will go to the wrecking yard. Yeah, that when I was trying to get a 258 cam, there seems to be a supply problem for flat tapping cams. There is, and that's what the guys from Elgin told me. They're like, yeah, we don't have. We used to make that the reproduction of that cam or that cam. Maybe they even made it for GM. I don't know, but they had that 375 horse 396 or LS6 or 425 horse like the L72 427 cam. We had that cam, but it's been a long time since we made it because the flat tappet stuff, the whatever the metal is that they use for it, I guess is in short supply, and there hasn't been obviously a big call for that camshaft either. I think that the I'm going to check, Dean, and see. The L78 does not have a hyphen in it. The one for the original 396. Have you run across a 7.3 Godzilla motor? Nope, I have not. Have to weld up custom exhaust manifolds for a Dodge 2.5 since I'm going external wastegate. I'm going to do that also. I'm going to make a turbo manifold for the Dodge, the 2.2 and the 2.5, and it will definitely have an external gate on it. The Chris, the wastegate position for that would be fitment. Where can you put it, and then where can you route the exhaust out of the wastegate, given what's going on in the engine bay? Like in the engine compartment, I mean, on the dyno, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to put it in the direction of the flow so that it works very well, and it probably will be a little longer than it needs to. But the nice thing is I don't have a firewall or anything to deal with. I also don't have to worry about anything else around the motor. So I can make a fancy tubular header that ends in, you know, a 2.5-inch V-band or something, because it doesn't need to be nearly as big as the other one. That way we can run T2s and T3s and presumably a T4, although I don't know why we ever would. But it'd be interesting to see if that 222 could even spool a GT45. It probably wouldn't, but we could make a cool tubular header. I'm going to also run the factory exhaust manifold for the NA version, which I think is probably going to work really well for a turbo exhaust. Are you going to make the 396 a stroker? No, it's going to be a reproduction of a factory L78 396. On the BTR torque cam says PDS. What does that mean? It usually means positive displacement supercharger, but I don't know why the torque cam would list that. I mean, you can use it on a positive displacement supercharged motor or a centrifugal or a turbo or anything else, but I don't know what one you're looking at, and I don't know why they would list that. Have you heard of a 483 from Ford? It was that an industrial motor or something? Because they did have versions that they made of big industrial deals. Are you doing adjustable? I'm going to do an adjustable runner length intake manifold, but not an adjustable runner length exhaust. I keep getting questions about Vizard stuff and his LSA formula about choosing camshafts. Richard, have you ever run a truck 377? What is a truck 377? If it's a big block, do you mean the 366? Oh, Dean, Ford had larger bore spacing motors for trucks. So how is our poll doing? We have 60, were the wastegates responsible for the power change on the exhaust test? 61% saying yes. Jimmy, Summit has an L78 cam? That would be like perfect if they did. Or Summit Racing. Get it that way. Flat tappet rat muscle. That's on all cylinders. Let's see. I can send a message to Brian and see. Oh, Jeff Smith did a story. Summit Racing has chosen 3 flat tappet camshafts to reproduce with very similar but not always exact same specs. So if the specs listed here are not exactly the same as your research indicates, the reason is these Summit Racing muscle car replacement cams employ more recent lobe technology and will likely outperform the originals while delivering the original idle sound. So they made the L34. So 242, 242, 520, and 114. And then they made an L88. I'll have to call Jeff. Jeff Smith might have one of these camshafts. He's a cam guy. Jeff Smith and Evan Smith are not related. Are the lifters in LS3s actually LS7 lifters? I don't know if those are the same. LT is doing a 5.4 Navigator engine. Can't wait to see what it does. An original 4.6 Mustang. Yeah, 5.4 Navigator is a 4-valve deal. We've run those a lot. I have some 1,000 horsepower stuff on the channel up with one of those. They use 300 crank, 400 pistons, and 350 rods. Turn them like 327s with solid bottom end. I'm familiar with 372s or 377s that people would produce, but it's not a factory motor, though. At least not that I know of. Monza, take a look at what Evan Smith and Brian and BTR and those guys are doing. They've done a lot of stuff with that Godzilla motor. So how's our poll doing? 60% saying yes. We are going out tonight. Ultra, Richard, is there a blow-through carb that's budget friendly? I don't know. I don't know if we can take a look and see how much the quick fuel. Quick fuel blow-through carbs. They're not cheap. Drag race, blow through. Let's see what we got going. Yeah, those are $1,000 carburetors or $1,100 carburetors. There's got to be a way to make that less expensive, right? What's the difference between a small block and a big block? It's the bore spacing, really, and the physical size in this case of those blocks as well. Can the average Joe modify a regular carb for blow-through work? You can actually, if you can run a regular carburetor as a blow-through if you enclose it in a carburetor enclosure like Vortec and Paxton did with their carb enclosures. You can just run a regular carburetor. It doesn't have to be a blow-through. So that works. Otherwise, there are things online. There are videos online about how to modify them. I've never tried to do it. Star, thank you very much. I took the wife to the Snowbird Nationals for her anniversary. It was a bad idea. If we're going out tonight, does that mean no 7 o'clock feed? It might. It might mean that. Have you dive tested a 428 FE Ford engine? I haven't personally, but there's a guy that comes into Westech that does a lot of those reproductions, and he ran a bone stock because a guy wanted a factory stock 428 Cobra Jet motor. And it did not make very much power. I think it was rated at 335 and it kind of made about that. 12-year wedding anniversary on Sunday. Congratulations. What did I miss? You missed everything, Dan. We talked about all of it. Wastegates and low buck turbo Porsches and all kinds of stuff. I did some research before the 427 big block was made, a 377 all aluminum back in the 70s. GM put 377s in the Grand Sport Corvettes, but they were small blocks. You should build the blow through 750 carburetor, modify it yourself and test it. I can try that. Would 350 horsepower be an unreasonable expectation for a 455 with a 218 intake duration or less cam, intake swap, everything else factory compression? Is it a low compression 455 or is it the higher compression? Yes, Dan, low buck Porsche stuff. It just has to be a 924. Although probably not even that. I would imagine like 924 stuff is even not Porsche money, but Porsche money. Stars. What's a stage 1 TDS? I must not know what camshaft you're talking about. That's a big camshaft. That's not a torque cam. Tim's in the house. Been watching all of your custom intakes. Have you? I can't do anything out of carbon fiber. I don't have the ability to do that. I'm not a carbon fiber guy. Have you ever tested a big Chevy V6 motor? I haven't. Dan says he's done carbon fiber stuff. Reynolds Aluminum did a lot of work for GM in the 60s and 70s era. Yeah, they did. Reynolds was responsible for doing the aluminum big blocks for Can-Am. If you have high-speed air blades that are adjustable, all the better. It would be interesting to see how far we could get with, and herein lies the problem, how far we could get with just a standard carburetor, blowing through a standard carburetor. Will that work? And then the problem is that, 7 pounds becomes 27 pounds, and that's where people, it, and I don't know if this is human nature, but it does drive me nuts that people, they want not only that, like going to the wrecking yard and getting a junkyard motor and putting a cam and springs in it and running boost on it and being able to make, an all but unlimited amount of power. That's not amazing enough. I've had people tell me that they want it to not hurt fuel mileage. They want it to not, I don't want to hurt reliability either. It's got to be perfectly reliable. I'm like, yeah, you shouldn't be hot rodding stuff. You're not that guy. You don't get all of that. You don't get that it's still going to last 500,000 miles because you're not going to have it that long anyways. And that it can't hurt fuel mileage, and that it's got to be, it's just all the stuff that, like, that's unrealistic. A 396 is the same block as a low deck 455. Are you asking me, or are you telling me that it is? Reynolds did a 510, 495. Yeah, for Can-Am. Did Reynolds do the L88 block? I mean, the ZL1 blocks? Were they responsible for those blocks? This site claims that they have reproduction L78, L71, L72, L6 cam and lifters. What site is that, Mike? It doesn't show your site on your comment. I don't know if they made a funnel web for small block Chevys. I haven't ever seen one. So, Jimmy, you want me to drive to Ohio to get a 403? I have seen 403s in the wrecking yard. A torque cam is a 202 duration and around 500 lift. And maybe they're combining names or something. I haven't really looked on the site to see what they're doing. But the original torque cam that I tested is a 202 intake, 202 exhaust duration. It's a very small cam. I have to think that an intake manifold will get up to temperature under boost. You have to worry less about that than you do about the rest of the heat from the motor. I thought ZL1s were Winners Foundry. They may have been. That's what I was asking. I mean, they did they did the heads and the intake manifolds because they had the cool little snowflakes on them. But I just didn't know if, because I thought maybe because Reynolds was doing the race blocks for the Can-Am stuff, that they would have had a hand in what they were doing for the production stuff. Casey, I don't know who did they did Ford aluminum blocks too, but I would imagine it was Reynolds also. So they did Pontiac aluminum blocks too. Ultra, yeah, your fuel mileage, if you put a turbo on it at 5.3, your mileage shouldn't go down necessarily. Your cruise mileage shouldn't go down. This is a BTR stage 1 torque cam. I see. I've never heard those things combined. I'm not on that site enough. That's a big camshaft, is what I'm telling you. I'm going to scroll back and look at the specs on it. A 217, 230 something cam is a big camshaft. Relatively big. It's a lot bigger than a 202, 202. I don't know what you're trying to do with it. So too big for a stock 5.3 converter in 706. The 706 heads don't matter, but it's definitely too big for a stock converter. You need to be looking at the Truck Norris or smaller for a stock 5.3 or for a stock converter. So we're going to go ahead and close out our poll at 60% saying that they think the wastegate was responsible for the exhaust and not the manifolds themselves. So that's interesting. Hot mess. Why is a compound turbo with 110-pound injectors getting better mileage than my supercharged Ecotech with 60-pound injectors? Well, you're changing a lot of things there, and the supercharger and the turbocharger really have nothing to do with cruise fuel mileage, except you would be spinning the supercharger. So that is going to cost, even though you have a bypass valve on it, that is definitely going to cost fuel mileage compared to a turbo, which you're not doing anything to under cruise. And running and the injector size has nothing to do with fuel mileage either. As long as the air fuel ratio is kept under cruise, is kept constant between those two, which I doubt that your test regiment was that specific. But if one of them had a slightly richer mixture than the other while cruising, that would definitely affect fuel mileage. But those other things are not part of the equation. Are the flat tappet cam failures popping up on social media a real cause for concern? I think that they are, and I think that it's it might be a metallurgy problem. It might be a combination of things like we've seen on other things. It might be that they're not prepping them properly. Cosworth Cosworth made an LT1 called the Sledgehammer. The Sledgehammer was not an LT1. The Sledgehammer was a Corvette done by, actually, John Lingenfelter did the motor, but it was a Callaway Corvette that they went 258 miles an hour in. But it was not a production deal. That was and it was based off of the L98, the Callaway twin turbo option. Yeah, the carbon closures are expensive, but then they're going to make you pay one way or the other. How much boost will a regular Holly take? I don't know. I don't remember trying. I mean, I ran boost through a 4412, which is a regular Holly, and we ran it with E85, which is even weirder, on the 6-cylinder, and it worked fine. But it worked fine for wide open throttle. I don't know how much work is required to get it to run around and do all of the things that you're asking of a carburetor to do, a normal carburetor, as a blow through. It might be that, like 7 pounds, maybe it works fine. The Sledgehammer wasn't the V10, it was a V8. It was a twin turbo small block V8. I'm thinking it was a 355. It's been a while since I looked that up. Yeah, I have a procedure that I've used, and I haven't run flat tappets for a long time, but we ran both solids and hydraulic flat tappets in the reproduction motors that I did on the small blocks and the Fords, and lots and lots of zinc, high zinc break-in oil, zinc additive, assembly lube on all of the lobes and on the bottom of the lifters. Break it in on light valve springs, and then change the valve springs or add an inner valve spring, and then it worked fine. GM built a variant of the double overhead cam V8 ZR1, recall a V12. They did, what did they call that one? A snake skinner or something? They did versions of those that were higher horsepower ZR1 motors. 90 to 1, 455. Yeah, that shouldn't have any trouble making that kind of power. Assembly lube on the push rods. I don't put it on the push rods, but I do put oil on the tips. Dan, okay, ZL1 blocks were winners. Okay. It doesn't surprise me that they would choose the production facility to do that. I just wondered if Reynolds had a hand in that. Or if they were too busy making money off of Reynolds Wrap. On flat tap engines, I like to run lifters with oiling holes in the face. That seems to help. Okay. Richard, are you excited to test your Blowzilla engine build? I'll send you a regular 6.2 with it, and you can test one on the other. Admiral, where are you at? What state are you in? Or what country are you in? Oh, that's right. Hot Mess, you have blowers on both of them, right? Because I was thinking that this was a compound turbo deal, but it's not. It's it's hard to make the statement that you made that one fuel mileage is better than the other. A lot of times when we don't precisely document stuff, things that we want to be true are true, or things that we think are true are true. And also you have the variances from those things are not going to be the things that you're mentioning. They're definitely going to be the way that you drive, because the way that you drive can vary it by 50%. The other little thing is you'd be hard pressed to even measure what the difference is. So it's hard to differentiate those two things. And then also, is your tune better now on the thing that you're doing? Is your tune better on the cruise? You know, there's lots of things there. Okay, so you're in Texas. Check my photo album from Bowling Green. Oh, a Falconer ZR12. So Ryan did a 12-cylinder deal. That's cool. Have you considered using cams and lifters that have been nitrided? That definitely helps, especially with the cams. I was thinking that Admiral was in Australia for some reason. Happy USMC birthday. Richard's easy to tell when I'm bringing a quarter of a tank of gas each trip to work in the blower car and only an eighth of a tank. What do you think about the new Z06 engine? It's got a lot of cool technology. And Douglas, in any kind of production car, they wouldn't have people adjusting valves anymore. People are not going to lean over. People are not even going to open the hood on most cars anymore. But they're not, even Corvette guys are not going to be guys that are going to be leaning over the hood, taking the valve covers off and trying to adjust that stuff. I have a Ryan Falconer intake for a GM 2.8 liter V6. It's pretty wild. ITB cross ram. That would be cool. Although it seems like you have a $10,000 intake manifold for a $10 engine. No shade on 2.8. Yeah, carbon fiber connecting rods, that would not be good. I remember they tried carbon fiber valves on a cylinder head at Westec, and poof, it blew them all out. And maybe they're better there. Maybe that's possible, but super lightweight, so you could, because then you could team them with a short stroke and then a long rod and carbon fiber valves, and then you could run it to a million RPM. One more minute. Where did I got rid of my pole. No more pole dancing. I detailed the 2014 Camaro and asked the guy when it was the last time he looked under the hood, and he said never. Yep. Well, in my wife's car, in her Mercedes, I have looked under the hood. I looked under the hood because I wanted to check the oil, because the oil light came on and it was overfilled actually by the dealer when she took it in for service. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to check the oil and see where it is. And you can't do that because there's nowhere to check the oil externally on the engine. You have to go through a procedure in the computer to do it. I'm like, nope, pass on that. Yeah, the light came on for overfilled. It was over capacity. I was more talking about having solid lifters and not having to adjust them for 100,000 miles. Most of the engines have, you just wait for some of it to burn off. It was on for a long time. Dean, she doesn't really care about it. If I wanted to do something to it and make it faster, it would be fine. She would just never use it. She likes it because it's blue. An overfill and an underfill are the same thing on a I mean, I guess a lot of oil level sensors are, hey, if it gets down below this, but they're pretty sophisticated now. Aaron, I have not run methanol on anything. Dean, you saw what I did in the last Silver State? You mean my last Silver State, right? Because my last Silver State was a long time ago. Dan, that's what I suspect, is that maybe they had two guys doing it and one guy didn't do his part, or the one guy forgot or put too many quarts in, never drained the filter. I don't know what their deal was. Methanol is supposedly a huge gain. It will gain power, just like E85 gains power over gas. Methanol will gain even more, and especially on a boosted application, a blower or turbo. And on that note, it's time to go. I got more videos I got to do. I got to do another video just in case I missed the live feed. So if I missed the live feed, that means I'm out with Lisa and we're having a good time. Thank you guys all for showing up. Please, if you haven't, go check out the video, and so you guys can complain about the test on the exhaust manifold versus the header. Awesome stuff. And I'll see you guys all tonight. If not, tomorrow morning. Bazinga.